Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gennady Gor. I'm an assistant professor in the department, and I'm also coordinator for the 342 course, which you're currently taking with Dr. Zabrzhansky. So as I said when we just started, if you don't do well in his section, then you will have to see me in the fall when I'm teaching a big section of 342. Anyway, this is not what I was planning to talk about today. I want to tell you a little bit about research opportunities in my group and beyond my group as well. So something in more general. And why a student should do research. There are a bunch of reasons. First of all, you can get some hands-on experience, something you can then brag about when you're applying for jobs and you're saying, oh, it's not that I just was taking all these courses and getting my A's and B's. I also, well, got certain achievements, right? I solved some problems. Then fulfilling credit requirements, because you can take research credits. I know that many of you would like to take more and more course load. You can take research credits, CHE 491, and that research would count towards your credit requirements. Also, you will be applying the knowledge you learned in the courses you've taken so far. And I have to say, based on my personal experience, till I started doing research, I didn't appreciate what I was taught at all. So it really helps to digest the material. So you can learn some skills useful for the job markets, experimental and numerical methods and software, and some practical skills like time management. Also, you can strengthen your CV. You will have documented experience of something which you accomplished. Presentations, and this is extremely important because wherever you work, making presentation is, well, one of the things you typically do. And when you work on research, you always have to give presentation at the events we have at NJIT, or sometimes even at external conferences and publications. And I have to say that, one of my undergraduate student who did research with me graduated last year. He graduated with 2 papers, with one paper where he was a co-author and another he was the first author. And while he went straight after bachelor's, he went straight to grad school to get PhD. So he's a PhD student at Rutgers right now. Additionally, doing research could help you exploring different career paths, something you haven't thought about, but something you might find useful. BSMS or just a mass program, because, well, you can do research. You can have much more time to do research during the MS program, or PhD programs straight from bachelor's. And this is not rare. This is quite typical. People start doing research and get to a PhD program right after they finish their senior year. And being in a PhD program, it's not, I know that often students don't think about it, don't consider this option. It's like a job, right? It's you take courses, but you don't have to take many courses. And university pays your tuition. You don't pay anything when you're in the PhD program. And then you work on your research, and moreover, you're getting paid. You're getting paid a stipend, which is not too high, but sufficient to live. And this is the last thing I wanted to mention here, the last but not the least reason to do research. You can get paid for doing something creative, for doing something fun. And for undergrads, there are more than 2 options, but students who work with me, they typically have either of those. So it's a Provost Summer Research Fellowship, which I think almost, if not all of the undergraduate students who work with me, they got. It's $3,000 for 2 months of work during the summer. This summer, this program was canceled, unfortunately, but I'm sure the next summer it will be available. And also, you can be hourly paid from a research grant. If you start contributing to a project, start bringing the result. Again, I don't think there was an exception among the students who work with me who did not get paid. I don't pay students right away. It's not that I'm going to give you a job, like a paid job right away. You start as a volunteer, you learn things. Once you learn things and start producing something, then I'm more than happy to start paying you. All right, that's in general about research. And by the way, I will have some time for questions in the end, but if there are some urgent questions right away, you can ask me. So broadly, there are two types of research. So first, and this is the most common thing for chemical engineering especially, is experimental research, when you measure properties, synthesize chemicals, explore phenomena, and so on. And this is the most of the professors in our department, and not only in our department, and any chemical engineering department, they do experimental research. They have a lot of really complicated instruments in their labs, and their students, graded and undergraduate students, spend a lot of time in the labs while making sure these equipment works and produces what they want to get. And this is for example, it's a picture from the Halazov research group from his lab. You can even see Ogo, his student, here in the background. However, in addition to experimental research, there are also people who do theoretical research or modeling, calculating properties, modeling a chemical, simulating a phenomenon, and so on. And this is a kind of research I do. And for that, you don't need to be in the lab. You can sit at your laptop at home or whatever you're sitting, and working on your stuff remotely. This is actually, I have to admit that people doing computational theoretical research, they had the least impact from the COVID crisis, right? Because all the students, all my undergraduate students, were able to continue working during these months. And in the picture here, it's the HPC. It's a high performance computer, or supercomputer. This, the one at the NJIT, is a little bit smaller, but still, it's a powerful tool which we all use to get our calculations done. All right, and there are a lot of different kinds of theoretical research, and I focus specifically on one, well, not technique, but one family of techniques. And in order to say more about it, I'd like to ask you, well, I'd like to bring a quote from these gentlemen, and I'm curious if somebody knows who he is. If you can type in the chat. Yeah, I see. Yep, I see an answer. And yep. I have, yeah, excellent. I have a couple of answers. They're right. This is famous Richard Feynman, physicist, Nobel Prize laureate. And well, I love these quotes from him. So he said, if in some cataclysm all of the scientific knowledge were to be destroyed and only one sentence passed on to the next generations of creatures, what statement would contain the most information in the fewest words? And I'll give you the answer. I believe it is the atomic hypothesis, or the atomic fact, or whatever you wish to call it, that all things are made of atoms, little particles that move around in perpetual motion, attracting each other when they're a little distance apart, but repelling upon being squeezed into one another. In that one sentence, you will see there is an enormous amount of information about the world, if just a little imagination and thinking are applied. And what I do, I apply these imagination and thinking, and the techniques I'm using are called molecular modeling or molecular simulation, where we're mimicking, on a computer, we're mimicking the behavior of molecules, different molecules, to predict the properties of fluids or solids or solid fluid interfaces. It could be thermodynamic properties, it could be transport properties, and so on. So we predict those from the very basic knowledge on the molecular structure and interactions. So I'll give a few examples of the projects I work in the group right now. And then I'll list a few more in the end, and then you'll have much more information on my website if you'd like. So my group is called Computational Laboratory for Porous Materials. However, I don't work exclusively on porous materials. It's much broader, as I said, but probably my main focus area is porous materials and nanoporous materials in particular. So first, adsorption-induced deformation, and I keep showing this beautiful picture of a pine cone. This is not just a pine cone. This is an artificial pine cone. All right. So pine cones, when they're dry, they open. When they're wet, they close. So by changing the humidity, you can induce certain mechanical stresses in these porous system and make the system strain, make the system deform. So this phenomenon is known as adsorption-induced deformation. The humidity gets adsorbed in the porous structure, causing these stresses. And the idea, of course, people don't care that much about pine cones, but they care about other type of materials which could serve as sensors or actuators. And this artificial pine cone is made of nanoporous silica, and there are a lot of experimental effort in building these smart materials which respond to the changes of different gas concentration. But the theory is still building, and one of the projects I work on is on these coupling between adsorption and mechanics, and this project has been recently funded by National Science Foundation. Another project I work on is related to molecular modeling of chemical warfare agents. And while the chemical weapons has been banned a long time ago, before most of you guys were born, right? Nevertheless, terrorists continue using them. For example, well, there was a case of use of sarin in Syria and so on. So there is a need for protection and decontamination from chemical warfare agents. And well, in order to design those, in order to develop those, you need to make some experiments. However, experiments are extremely dangerous because some of these substances are extremely poisonous. So while these are the pictures of people wearing protective gear to protect themselves from sarin. So instead of making experiments with sarin, experimentalists use some molecules which are very similar, molecules, for example, of dimethyl methylphosphonate. And you can predict how sarin would behave, well, from experiments with this molecule on the right. However, obviously there will be some difference. In molecular simulation, we can assess how big would be the difference between sarin and DMMP with respect to different properties. Because when we're doing molecular simulation, well, we don't care how poisonous the molecule is. It's not poisonous for our computers for sure. So that's another project I work on. The third one I want to mention is a collaborative project with Professor Halizov from chemistry department. It's related to the restructuring of soot particles in the atmosphere. And soot is, well, incompletely combusted carbon particles, and it's a pollutant and a climate forcer. And the optical properties of soot, which are important for the climate, they strongly depend on the soot particle morphology. However, these morphology of the particles, it doesn't stay constant. It changes, and I'll show you a picture just in a second. These soot particles, they appear as these fractal aggregates. However, when vapors condense on them, they start restructuring. In some cases, they don't restructure that much. In other cases, they completely restructure. They collapse into a globular structure. And then, of course, the optical properties of this thing is totally different from this one. And the physics and the surface chemistry and the entire process, why in some cases soot particles restructure in other they don't, it's not entirely clear. And Dr. Halizef and I were working together on developing experimental and modeling modeling framework to understand and predict the properties of soot particles. This is not all of the projects I have. There are several more. For example, we simulate interactions of biomolecules with mineral surfaces. I'm not allowed to talk more about it. This is a project funded by Colgate Palmolive and Piscataway. Then simulation of materials for lithium-ion batteries, the project funded by New Jersey Institute of Technology, one of the internal grants. Equation of state for confined fluids. Well, I'm sure you were talking about equations of state in this course. Well, for bulk fluids, this is something well studied. For fluids in the pores in tiny confinement, this is something very important and, well, much less explored. And this project we're doing together with people from ExxonMobil here in New Jersey, and some other more fundamental theoretical projects like developing new Monte Carlo simulation techniques or employing machine learning for predicting thermodynamic properties. So before concluding, I want to pitch one more thing. So I'm sure you had to do some calculations in this course and maybe hopefully in other courses as well. I don't know what you used, but when I teach 342, I show examples when the calculations were done in Python. Chris, what did you use? Did you use Excel or did you use Python?
Just Excel, because I don't want to go through the trouble of teaching Python online. This is enough, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I totally understand you. In fact, teaching Python is very easy, but you can't teach Python while you're teaching thermo, right? Or you can't teach Python while you're teaching transport. Therefore, there is a definitely demand for an additional course on Python, and this course I will offer in the spring 2021 as a special topic elective. And I want to mention just that Python is the third most popular programming language after C++ and Java, and one of the simplest programming language, unlike the C++, which you guys were taken as a required course. And it's an extremely efficient alternative to a calculator or an Excel when you solve chemie problems. And as I said, I use it extensively in my 342 course. So it would be useful for many of you to take it well before, after, at the same time. So anyway, if you're interested, next spring it will be offered, hopefully in a conventional, not online format. And yeah, I'd like to conclude. First, do research. Second, if you're interested in doing research, our department has a web page where all the professors' research interests are described. Well, if you want to learn more about my group, here's the link for my group, and well, my profile on the NJIT website and my research group web page. And if you think this is something you'd like to try, email me, send me your CV, send me your transcript, accompanied with a short cover letter, and well, we'll talk. And if you're interested in learning some programming tools in the future, sign in for the elective course in the spring 2021. And that's it. And I'd be happy to answer some questions. I hope you have some.
Hi, Dr. Gore. This is Sarah. I was just a little curious about the computational models that you synthesize in the lab, even theoretically. I did a little bit of MOF and ZIF simulations, but my research was mainly first understanding how do ZOF and ZIF and MOFs behave, and how by changing some parameters, what is the outcome of changing those? And then using this knowledge to build a MOF capable of absorbing pollutants from water. In the structures you showed us, nothing seemed kind of familiar to what I was doing. So I was wondering if this is somehow related to those structures or if it's completely different.
So it's a very nice question. So I currently don't have a funded project on MOFs specifically. However, I have one other student who's working on molecular simulations of adsorption in zeolites, and the extension of these projects, we are planning to start looking into MOFs as well. In general, looking at how different chemicals adsorb on MOFs, it's a very big area, and this is something I'm certainly, this is something on my list, but this is not something I'm currently active in. But in the problems I mentioned, I mentioned these three specific problems because they're very, to show the breadth, right? Many of other projects could be even, well, if I go in a little bit more details, could be probably even broader. So if working, for example, on adsorption of pollutants is something of interest to you, and you think you would like to approach it from the computational point of view, we should definitely talk.
Awesome, thank you. And I just sincerely really want to thank you and Dr. Dobrzansky for sharing this with us. I think it's really just important to see how our classes do apply in real life. So really, thank you guys.
Sure, thank you. Any more questions, please? Any kind of questions about research in general, about Python course, about my research specifically? And by the way, don't hesitate. If you have questions which you don't feel like asking right now, email me, ask me a question in email. That's very, very appropriate. All right, if no questions, then well, I would wrap up then, and well, don't spend any more time from Thermo on these presentations. So Chris, I would appreciate if you share the recording with me after that. And thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks for presenting them with this opportunity. Hopefully some of them take advantage of it. Yeah.
Thank you.